Washington and the US president. We hear Donald Trump announce a new round of tariffs in about half an hour's time, targeting China, this time for stealing intellectual property from US businesses. It's being reported the US will also sue China at the World Trade Organization for trade violations. Already China is threatening to retaliate, so for the next few minutes, let's talk tariffs and trade wars. With me is Dr. Yu Ji, head of China Foresight at the London School of Economics. Prior to that, specialised in Chinese investments in Europe. And also with me in the studio is Josh Kallmer, Senior Vice President at the Information Technology Industry Council, which represents some of the major US tech companies. Both of you welcome here to our programme. We'll hear from the President pretty shortly. Jonathan, to you first of all, tell me the sorts of things the Chinese are accused of doing.
Well, it's a lot of things. I mean, it has historically been a pattern of theft or intrusion to obtain intellectual property. In recent years, increasingly what we're seeing are more circuitous, roundabout measures of forcing companies to enter joint ventures, to turn over proprietary intellectual property as a condition for doing business. Some of it's written down, a lot of it is not. And so companies find themselves in a very difficult position of having to choose between not doing business in this incredibly important market on the one hand, or on the other hand, potentially giving over the crown jewels of their businesses.
I'll come back to that point in a moment. But Dr. G, tell me, the White House says they've tried everything and everything has failed. That's why we're going to get this raft of measures in the next little while. But is the situation getting worse, getting better? Where are we with these sorts of things we've just heard about?
Well, I think this really depends on how you look at it. Obviously, back to 15 years ago, when China first joined WTO, what China really wants is to have as much new technology as China can. But unfortunately, obviously, China also moved up to the value chain. So obviously, China would also want to protect its own territory, you know, this newly emerging innovation technologies. So in that case, obviously, China is in that ambivalent position. And also, China just had a new government in place. And this current new government hasn't really yet defined the right rhythm to deal with Trump's administration.
Jonathan, I mean, your body represents, I mean, some of the biggest names in the world, the Dells, the IBMs, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Apples. Just tell me, in terms of those sorts of clients, what is the damage they think that is being done to them? How concerned are they about all of this?
They're incredibly concerned. I mean, the damage occurs really on two planes. It is the short-term difficulty of competing in China when the government, either directly or through other entities, puts a thumb on the competitive scale of business. But it is also this fear that I mentioned a minute ago about making decisions today that could compromise the core of the value and the core of the innovation that these companies have invested in into the future. So the concern is deep and it's widespread.
Dr. G, in terms of the tariffs, is that the right direction to actually combat that successfully for the Americans, do you think?
Well, I think looking about Chinese perspective, it really depends on which sector. So there's a carrots and sticks in here. So the carrots China can offer is try to open up its own financial market to allow more American finance to go into the Chinese vast market. But the sticks lies in here and how China is going to punishing companies like GE or like Boeing, and whether China will decide whether they're going to buy those jets and not going to hit the American economy very hard as well.
Now, let me ask you the same question. Do you think, I mean, you explained the threat, the dangers, the damage. Do you think this is the right approach to actually combat all of that?
Well, let me first say that we have been greatly supportive of the administration's efforts to take this seriously. It has been 16, 17 years since China joined the WTO. We've seen this pattern of conduct ever since then, and it is time to redefine the relationship. And so we are supportive of that. We have misgivings about tariffs, deep misgivings, because fundamentally they're attacks on consumers. They punish basically U.S. workers, U.S. families, people who buy consumer products, apparel, other kinds of things, whatever is on the list. Those are the people who are going to suffer.
The danger, though, if you get into a trade war, the Chinese already threatening retaliation, that it rebounds on exactly the people you've just been mentioning, the US consumer. There's a real danger, even in the administration, as they were explaining this in the last 24 hours, recognised and are nervous about various sectors like agriculture that could take a hit.
You're absolutely right. And so you have the immediate hit of the tariffs themselves, and then you have the potential but very likely knock-on hit of retaliation from China, we think there are other tools. We think there are other ways of having a strong response, doing it in a way that is coordinated with trading partners, the EU and Japan, and that will actually induce changes in Chinese behavior in a way that allows everybody to move forward.
A final quick question to Dr. Xi. I mean, protectionism is absolutely there in the White House, in the up. But one analyst only the other week was saying that Trump thinks his strategy is throw a punch, disorientate the opponent, and then whilst they disorientate, then renegotiate to America's advantage. Is there a chance that China actually backs down in all of this?
Well, I think it's very likely. I mean, as I said, we just had a new government, and then obviously how this new government going to reorient itself to deal with Trump, and that's really a question we don't know yet. But what it really for sure is Xi Jinping wouldn't really like to let people lose jobs, and that's one bottom line for the Chinese Communist Party. Have to keep society in a very stable employment level, and otherwise that's going to be detrimental not just for U.S.-China relations, but most likely for the fate of the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, listen. Fascinating analysis from both of you. Thank you so much for joining me here on the programme. Thank you. Now, still to come on today's Global, England cricket bosses tweet